what is good to you?
Acknowledging that everybody messes up, acknowledging that people are generally doing the best they can with the resources they have available at the time, and that's going to change from day to day. Yeah, to me, that's good.
Welcome to Chasing Good, a circle group podcast with the aim to help us better understand the good that's happening in the world today. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to Chasing Good. Here with me today, we have Leanne Butterworth from Empathy First. Leanne, thank you so much for joining me today here.
Amazing. Thank you for inviting me. This is fun.
Absolute pleasure. So, look, I'd like to kick off today by obviously, we're going to be talking about a range of topics, but I'd like to start by talking about yourself. So let's get an idea of your background, what's gotten you into the purpose sector, and what are you looking to make? What change are you looking to make in the world, and what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, right. Okay, so that is a big question because I don't have a linear, I mean, who does? So my background is exercise physiology. I ran projects and then I had my children. And when I got back into work, I started working with a not-for-profit who ran a mental health charity. It was youth mental health. And one of the projects that I ran for them was for World Mental Health Day. And I created a virtual reality simulation of psychosis. And that was called Lose Your Mind. And I went, there's something here, there's something bigger. And so we created this workshop that went with it. And it was amazing for the people that I ran it for. So people who had context, police, psychs, teachers. And I ran it overseas, ran it in Iowa. And people kept getting the same thing wrong. And it kept coming back to this empathy thing. So I ran that for a couple of years and then I took it and it became mine. I went back to university while I was running that and I did a postgraduate in nonprofit philanthropy and social enterprise. So that sort of was another element where you learn about human-centered design and empathy. And then while I was there, we started talking about, as you do, everybody in social enterprise talks about their why. So it was talking about what is your why and what's your driver? And people are like, well, why do you care about this thing? I said, oh, because it's important. They're like, no, why do you care about this thing? Why is it you? And I went, yeah, no, people need to know. I said, they're like, no, dig deep. And I went, because I had postnatal depression and being dismissed sucks and I want people to know how to talk to people. They went, there you go. So in that moment, it was this beautiful collision of worlds where I went, social enterprise, empathy, my story. Oh, my story has value in this. So then when COVID hit and I couldn't do the virtual reality anymore, I pulled it all apart and said, what have I got here? What is this? And the combination of people kept getting the same things wrong. What is this healthy empathy thing? What do we need to understand about it? Where does my story fit into it? And where does social enterprise, human-centered design and empathy fit into that? So that was the beginning of 2020, and I put it all back together as Empathy First and went, right, everything I've learned, everything I've experienced is valuable. And it was almost like this ikigai coming together of going, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I'm meant to be sharing with the world. So all of the experiences, my exercise physiology, my motivational speaking, all these things that I thought were a waste of time, everything has come back into this one piece of the puzzle, which is Empathy First. So that's the short answer. Where I'd like it to go is more of it, more of these conversations, more of this understanding, more of this making it accessible and people going, oh, is that what it is? Oh, I don't need to be afraid of that. I can do that. That's where I want this to go, where almost I don't exist anymore. I don't want there to be a need for empathy training anymore. I want this to be common knowledge. I want this to be the norm. That's big picture stuff. Awesome. So, yeah.
Good on you. That's amazing. So there's a few pieces that you kind of talked to there and a few terminologies I'd like to dive into.
Go for it.
Before we go. So you mentioned human-centered design. Obviously, social enterprise. Can we talk to the connection between human-centered design, social enterprise, empathy there.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
Could you kind of break those down and
Yeah,
talk about the
absolutely.
connection points there?
Absolutely.
Context?
So when I went back to uni, we did all sorts of things. Social enterprise was one of them. And now I actually lecture social enterprise at QUT as well.
Yeah, nice.
So I love it and I love breaking it down. So if we look at social enterprise first, social enterprise is a business style or a form of doing business where the way that I talk about it is it's got 4 pieces of the pie. The first one is do good. So we all start with do good. What is the thing that you want to change in the world? What is the problem that you see? Who do you want to help? Who are your beneficiaries? What is the thing that in a perfect world we wouldn't have to worry about anymore? And it might be related to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. You might be interested in clean water, poverty, peace, something. The second question we ask in social enterprise is, what is your do well? What is the thing that you sell, the product or the service that you sell in order to generate the revenue to do the good? So traditional nonprofit charity models, they do donations, grants, fundraising, which are quite fickle ways of doing business. They're quite fickle funding streams because grants can just disappear, funding can disappear. You've got a recession and next thing you know, people aren't donating anymore. So selling something, a product or a service, is a beautiful way of generating the revenue in order to drive that doing good. Third piece of the puzzle is be good. So you've got do good, do well, be good, which is, are you operating in an ethical, sustainable, well-governed, empathetic way? Is everything that you're doing through this lens of being ethical, being sustainable, being well-governed, being empathetic? Because what you don't want to do is create a problem over here. So you're selling plastic toys in order to, solve regeneration over here. You can't create a problem to solve a problem.
Walk the talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then sitting underneath all of that or in the background of all of that is be well, which is, are you taking care of yourself and those around you? Are you doing this in a healthy, sustainable way? Human-centered design is a way of thinking about issues, way of thinking about problems. And at the very first step is empathy. Who are you designing with? Who are you designing for? Because what you don't want to do is design at people. You don't want to sit back and say, you know what, the thing that homeless people need is CVs and a suit. You've really got to talk to people and learn about them and what do they want and what do they need. And there are some beautiful examples of how this has worked throughout the world. But whether it's the thing that you're selling and understanding your customers or the service you're providing or the solution you're offering, if you haven't truly talked to the people who you're trying to help, it will not work and may actually make things worse. So human-centered design is starting with empathy, coming up with lots of ideas, ideating, refining, testing, failing, but really coming back to that, I don't have the answers. And a beautiful question that we use is, how might we? So you don't start with the end in mind. You don't start with the solution in mind and go, I need an app. It's, how might we use social enterprise in order to reduce recidivism? Like people who reoffend after leaving prison. How might we improve the mental health of 18 to 35-year-olds? That's where the good stuff comes in. That's where the playing, that's where the understanding comes in, because then you would need to understand what's going on for 18 to 35-year-olds. Then you can come up with lots of ideas, lots of terrible ideas, and that's where the gold comes from. So that's sort of social enterprise and empathy and human-centered design all going in together. And the thing that I'm finding is the more we talk about human-centered design and design thinking, and people go, yeah, empathy. And I go, but what is empathy? And they go, yeah, it's just feeling the feelings. And I go, no, empathy's bigger than that. So for me, when we're talking about these massive concepts that really affect people's lives in an intimate and important way, you need to understand the empathy piece first so that we're all talking about the same thing. Because if one of us is talking about one type of empathy and another's talking about another type of empathy and they use very different parts of the brain, The how part gets very tricky.
What a wonderful segue.
You're welcome.
Could you please talk? What is empathy?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. Empathy as a concept, as a word, has only been around for about 150 years. The thing itself has been around for a lot longer, and we can see evidence of it in ancient Roman texts and art and things like that. Empathy is multifaceted. It is interesting. But if I was to ask a lot of people, what is it? I'd get 50 different answers and most of them would be correct. The way that I look at it, and because it has only been around as a concept for about 150 years, there's a lot of research happening around the world by a lot of different specialists and countries and people who are more advanced. I kind of break it down into 3 types. And what we're aiming for is healthy, sustainable empathy at the heart of it.
So as an overarching.
Overarching. This is what we want to get to. So the 3 types that I describe are emotional empathy is the first one, and it's feeling the feelings. So you feel sad, I feel sad. It's perfectly natural. It's how we build relationships. Unhealthy emotional empathy is I feel it for you. I take responsibility for it. I have poor boundaries, or I take on your stuff and try and fix it, and I don't practice good self-care. So words that we can hear in that sort of space are codependency or the empath. So we don't get permission to feel your feelings. I take it on. And that can be quite depleting, because if I feel your stuff and then I feel somebody else's stuff and then I feel somebody else's stuff, I get to the point of apathy going, I've got nothing left. Now, the trouble is in Australia, because we have this individualist mindset that more is better. I want more stuff, more likes, more land, more money. And I think empathy is feeling the feelings. There's this huge misperception there, like, oh my God, you're asking me to feel more. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is, because that's not sustainable. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got cognitive empathy. What's it like to be you? Who are you? What makes you tick? What's your experience? Yeah, what's going on for you? Unhealthy cognitive is, I'm going to learn all about you. I'm going to put it through my lens, my filter, my experiences, my privilege, and I'm going to hand it back to you with a spoonful of judgment and go, you know what you should just do? Or, oh my God, I can't believe you said that, or I can't believe they did that, or I can't imagine. So you've got unhealthy cognitive and you've got unhealthy emotional, and they're 2 very different parts of the brain. What we want to get to in the middle is this healthy, compassionate empathy. The ability to share and understand the feelings and perspectives of somebody else and respond appropriately. So you want to be able to have some emotional literacy. You want to know what your false beliefs about emotions are. You want to know what boundaries are. You want to know what good self-empathy looks like. Because if I understand myself, I can better understand you. If I hold on to false beliefs about emotions, I'm going to probably project them onto you. And so that's healthy emotional empathy. Healthy cognitive empathy is I'm listening to you. I understand you as much as I possibly can. I may never understand you, but I'm going to honour you as an individual with your story and your humanity and your stuff, and not try and conform you into something that I think you should be. And then responding appropriately is in a way that makes you feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. So I might have gone through the thing that you've gone through. I might know what that feels like. But if I then go, yeah, I know all about that, and then I make assumptions about your experience, I don't make you feel heard. So making somebody feel heard, valued, visible, and safe is, tell me more about that. And how did that make you feel? And yeah, right, it makes perfect sense you feel that way. And trying to understand the person. You might not agree with them. You might not like them. But getting an understanding of who they are, what they feel, what their experience is, and validating that. That's essentially what we're trying to get to. So you might not, like I said, you might not agree with the person, but you can validate their experience, you can validate their emotions. Now, the thing that happens with emotions sometimes is it's based on the wrong information. So I have a strong emotional reaction to something somebody said, but they didn't actually say that. So the information it's based on was wrong, but my emotional reaction is still valid. So things like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way is completely dismissing of the emotional reaction. It's completely human to have positive emotions and negative emotions and good days and bad days and reactions to things. It's all valid. It's how we interpret those and how we validate those and how we feel about those. That's what builds connection. Understanding somebody's story, understanding what's going on for them, giving them space, making eye contact if you feel comfortable doing that. But giving space to someone to just be themselves is hugely empathetic.
There's so many layers to it.
So many.
There's so many layers to it, and it's interesting because it takes two to tango, right, as well. And so I'm sure you come across this as well, being trained in empathy and having a very in-depth knowledge. I'm sure there's times where you, as a highly empathetic person, really just need to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, as a highly empathetic person who has a strong awareness of it, when you know that the rules of engagement for you to create strong connection with somebody who just needs to vent to you, how would you manage that situation?
Oh, that's all trust. That's all trust. So there are people, so we've got to remember, like, empathy is based on permission.
Yeah.
So it's not because I understand what empathy is, I then get to go and feel all the things. I'm not into that. It's if people tell me something, they know about boundaries. Yeah, so they go, hey, can I vent? Have you got a few minutes? So it's getting permission both ways and then building that trust with, and for me, it's with my best girlfriends. And I get permission. I go, hey, I need to vent. And they're like, have at it. Yeah, and they know they don't need to problem solve. They know that that's not what this is. Because the process of venting, and not in a negative way, I'm not going to speak at you, but it's the process of, I don't know, working out your stuff and talking about it that makes you go, oh, is that what I feel about it? Yeah, right. Oh, cool. And you say, thank you for listening to that. They go, cool. Thank you for sharing. But it's by no means you become a doormat by understanding this. You don't become an open door for people to just vent their stuff all over you. Empathy is definitely a two-way street. And if they do, that doesn't make them a bad person. It means that they feel safe talking to you and you can show gratitude for that. But showing boundaries as well to go, hey, now's not a good time, or that's a level of detail that I don't feel comfortable with. So it's really understanding that it doesn't just, you don't then have a sign going, tell me your stuff. You're not a helpline. But really creating that trust and those safe spaces so that if I say, look, now's not a good time, or it's too much detail, or this is a lot, the other person goes, yeah, like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, let's see what we can do, or let's talk another time, or let's go for a walk, or, So empathy training is not learning to be everything to everybody all the time. Big part of empathy training is boundaries and self-empathy so that you can show up for somebody as your whole self, knowing that you don't even have to take it on. Like if somebody vents to me, it's not about me, but I'm grateful that I've given them a space, that they feel safe enough to talk to me and open up to me. Like, that's amazing. It's not on me to fix it or take it on or nothing. So that's
it's perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's having the ability to take a step back and see it for what it is.
Absolutely.
And you're being empathetic to yourself in that same context too, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
By giving yourself the space to give them the space.
Absolutely.
Not easy though.
Oh God, no.
That's.
I mess it up all the time. Just ask my children. I mess it up all the time because you want to be helpful, you want to be useful, you want to give solutions, you want to make it all better. But that's not actually what the other person needs. And so I work with the police, and the thing that I tell them a lot is you have to redefine what is useful. Because at the moment we think useful is giving advice and telling people how we feel and telling them how we've had a similar experience, and that's not actually useful. Because if we think about when we feel the most seen and heard and safe, the other person wasn't giving us a pamphlet. The other person was kind of just nodding and eye contact and validating. So useful is that. Useful doesn't have to be practical. Useful doesn't have to be action plans. So, for example, when I had postnatal depression, it wasn't diagnosed till my second child was 3, so it was very late diagnosed. And I think back on that time of what did I really need? And I needed a hug is what I really needed. I need somebody to go, dude, I see you. Whereas around me, a lot of people are like, the days are long, the years are short, cherish these moments. We all got through it, like have a drink. I needed a hug. I didn't want someone in action plan mode around me going, oh my God, is it depression? Is it anxiety? You need an action plan. You need a helpline. No, I need somebody to listen and validate and help me process my stuff and know that they're not going to judge me for it. Oh, well, you chose to have children. Like I genuinely heard that when I said, I'm struggling. Well, so understanding what is useful and creating safe spaces for people to just be their authentic self is useful, because not everybody needs a solution. If I'm going to share something with you, I might just be inviting you into my world and sharing something with you and telling you a story and building connection, because humans love stories. And if you go, wow, how'd that make you feel? Oh, you're interested in my story. Not, oh my God, you might have depression. You might have this. And you might need a solution. And no, I'm just sharing. But you'll shut me down quicker than you can say boo if you go, oh, you know what you should just do? Cool. Thanks. Like recently I was talking to somebody and it was about Mother's Day. And Mother's Day was, it was less than fun in my house for a number of reasons. And I spoke to this friend of mine and I said, I didn't enjoy it very much and this is what happened. And he said, you should just lower your expectations. And I went, okay. And just in that moment, I got what his intention was. I understood it, but I had to, again, take that step back and go, okay. You know what I mean? Like what's safe to share, what's not safe to share. But you don't feel compelled to keep sharing when somebody shuts you down.
I love that part of your TED Talk with the should just.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful piece of advice for people to take. And it's really easy to apply to everyday life.
Yeah.
Because it's just 101 for empathy, I guess, isn't it? It's just don't shut up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stop talking and don't give advice. Listen.
Yeah. The thing that a lot of people will say is, oh my God, I don't know. Just tell me how to do it. Just tell me how to do it. And they're asking for what to say. And often that's inauthentic if I just give you a script. The place that I start is take a deep breath, stop talking, listen. And when you do feel compelled to say something, do not let it include the words should or just, because they're hierarchical and they're minimizing and they're dismissive, and it means that your problems aren't that big a deal and I know better than you and I just want it to go away. Yeah? So should and just, whether they're in your texts, whether you hear them come out of your mouth, whether they're in an email. I mean, because you think about it, everybody loves being told what they should just do. Oh, it's the best. I had a police officer come up to me the other day and he said, I was talking to one of my staff and she was having a rough time, and he said, I heard myself say, you need to. And he said, I stopped myself and verbally said, I need to listen. And he said the dynamics of that conversation changed immediately. And I'm like, did a little dance. I'm like, yeah.
It's amazing.
Huge. So tiny.
And you'll never know the impact, actually, the compounding impact that single learning can potentially make for generations.
Yeah.
Like that's real life. That's amazing.
Yeah. I've had people tell me, like, after watching my talk, that oh, I did this. And I said, what was the impact? They said, the whole room relaxed. My shoulders relaxed. Like the relationship, they kept talking. They felt safe. You go, yeah, that's big. Because if you think about it, like if I'm if I am struggling, not just if I want to share, but if I'm struggling with something or I'm having an issue or I want to figure it out and I tell you and you're like, you should just call a helpline. And I tell somebody else and they're like, just have a drink. Tell this person, they're like, cherish these moments. I clam up. It's then too risky to keep telling people, and I internalize it and go, maybe it's me. Mm. So when we look at things like mental health, the stats are at the moment over 20% of us deal with mental health stuff. Yeah. Over 50% of us don't seek help. And one of the reasons is not knowing who will respond lovingly and supportingly or supportively.
It's funny, I've actually recently implemented a system with all of my relationships whereby when somebody comes to me and starts talking about something, I now say, would you like my advice?
Yeah.
Or would you like me or do you just want to vent?
Yeah.
And applying that, implementing that into my life has changed it's changed everything. It makes everything cleaner. It actually reduces conflict too, because sometimes I say things that people just don't want to hear because I'm a fixer sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a fixer for people who don't want me to be a fixer in the moment, So,
yeah. Permission is huge.
Permission's massive.
Yeah. So can I give you some advice? Yeah. Are you in a position to hear some advice? Would you like help with some problem solving? Even waiting to get the word vent out of there, to just let them talk. And I know you're giving yourself a get out of jail free card or a way to listen, because it's a really good question because we can only listen to so much at one time. So when we're listening with our fixer hat on, I'm listening for opportunities to fix. I'm listening for opportunities to give advice. If you've kind of given yourself that switch, then you're listening for the emotion. And that's a very different way to listen.
So it's actually, you're peeling it back even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you're listening for the emotions as opposed to going, wow, what happened next? It's, wow, how'd that make you feel? And then at the end, you go, would you like help with some problem solving, or can I give you some advice, or would it be helpful if I told you what I did in that situation? And they have every opportunity to go, no, I'm good. Thank you for listening. And that's it.
That is awesome. It's and it's funny. I'd love to know the science behind this as to making those kind of shifts. What how that impacts the neural pathways, how that impacts your perception on circumstances, on different. Have you found, I guess, for yourself, since you've kind of taken this pathway, that I guess it's, if we're talking general mental health and your ability to see positives or look at things contextually in a different way that might make it easier for yourself to work through. Has that been
hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely. I do a lot of work when I teach in unconscious bias.
Yes, okay.
So looking at how we think, why we think, what our assumptions are, and one of the interesting things that I found is, this whole thing, I was never an empath. I was never this person. It was only when I had my postnatal depression and got out of it and went, oh, that's what that was. Because before that, and I still am, I'm a Virgo. And Virgos are perfectionists. Virgos are achievement-oriented. Virgos, my value is in the awards on the shelf, getting the top marks, and being useful and being helpful. So a lot of what I've done is a whole lot of unlearning. And it's that I share with people. It's the things that I've had to unpack and unlearn and put back together. And I go, okay, well, I need something that's going to help me. Good, if it's going to help me, it's going to help other people. So I pull things in from positive psychology and all sorts of different areas. There is some research by you about how verbalizing someone else's emotions build trust And even just having a crack and getting it wrong builds greater trust than not having a go at all.
Well, you're typically going to be corrected too, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like you say something wrong, it's human nature to correct that.
There's also some research in terms of attachment theory where if somebody tells you something emotional and you react with something intellectual, it's interpreted the same as not responding at all.
Whoa.
So if they open up emotionally
Yeah.
and you respond intellectually with this is what you should do or the research says, or it's interpreted as being dismissed.
Which intentionally could be coming from a great place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's understanding, again, what is useful.
Yeah.
One of the things that's helped me a lot is intention.
Okay.
And I was thinking about this when I was thinking about your podcast of what is good. And it's understanding that as a general rule, people are doing their best. People aren't out to get you. They're not trying to piss you off. They're not trying to make your life harder. People are just doing their thing. And so when we say somebody did this to me, no, they just did it. Somebody cut me off. No, they just drove erratically. Or maybe the example I used recently was I rescue ex-racing greyhounds and I have the world's dopiest greyhound. He's adorable. But he hurt his leg and he needed a cone. So if you imagine a 38-kilo greyhound, they're very bendy. So the cone that they need is 1.5 feet long.
Jeez, yeah.
So I'm driving Harold.
Harold is a cracking name. That is
His name's Harry, but he's Harold when he's in trouble. We're driving back from the vet. And so I've got the world's most useless lampshade in the back of my car. And I'm trying for him not to stumble because he won't lay down so that he doesn't break his leg. And somebody honked me behind. Like they honked me because I went off slow at the lights because useless megaphone in the back. I don't want him to trip over. And we have this innate negative assumption of people that they're not doing their best, that there is this ulterior motive, that they're lazy or annoying or they're a dickhead or like we just jump to it. And so for me, assuming positive or neutral intention means I don't take it on personally. It's not about me. The person didn't text back not because they're angry at me, because they're busy. The same as I would expect if I don't text back, they're not making negative assumptions of me. And it's being open enough to communicate that. A friend of mine, she's 25, so she's a lot younger than me. I'm 45. And she said to me recently, we text, and she said to me recently, I know when you're done with the conversation. I said, what? She said, yep, I know when you are done with me and done with our conversation. I said, okay, do tell. And she said, you put a full stop at the end of what you're typing. And I said, wow, no. I said, I'm putting a full stop because I probably put a double space as well because I'm that old. I said, no, if I wanted to end the conversation, I'd do it with my words and not my punctuation. But I know for her, the assumption that she's making, like, what did I say? And why does she want to end the conversation with me? And we get so caught up in our own stories and our own assumptions and our own negative assumptions that, I love that she told me, and I now know that I put a full stop on purpose just to wind her up. But because she was able to tell me that, but we make up so many stories that have no bearing on the intention, on the person, on anything, that one of the things that I found that's released my stress load is not taking things so personally because I either assume positive or neutral intention. They didn't do it to annoy me. They didn't do it get under my skin. My children aren't doing this generally to annoy me. They're doing it because they're 12. That's how 12-year-olds are. They're going through some stuff. Their brain is goo at the moment. They're not doing it to wind me up. You know what I mean? Like the guy didn't cut me off because he went, oh, look, I'm going to cut her off. No. He probably had the world's most useless lampshade. He had grandma with the cake sitting in the back. Like maybe he's never driven that road before. But when you look at unconscious bias, that one's called fundamental attribution error. We are so quick to character assassinate people and look at their situation second.
Are there steps that you took? There's other questions I have as well, but sorry.
There's probably a lot.
Are there steps that you took? Because that sounds like an incredibly healthy way to look at the world. What have you done? How did you go about creating that habit of thought? Because that's not an easy thing to get to.
No.
Were there steps how did you remind yourself? Did you create triggers in scenarios?
Not necessarily. It's all habit and practice.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is reflection after the event.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Like you react. So I've created an emotional literacy online course, which is what is an emotion? How do you regulate them? How do you understand them? Because emotional intelligence is why do I feel like that? Emotional literacy is, oh, that's an emotion. And how do I not react to that?
Interesting. So the tiers of that, there's the tiers of emotional awareness.
Yeah, emotional awareness, emotional literacy. I'll get up in front of rooms full of people and say, hey, let's name all the emotions we can. And they go anxious, afraid, angry, happy, sad. And I go, keep going. They go, done. So there's 200 or something emotions. You think about the human experience as this beautiful Monet painting the size of a wall. And you're like, I'm going to give that a crack. And I got 4 crayons in my hand. So emotional literacy is the ability to name them and then regulate them. And then you go, well, why did I feel like that? And what did that bring out for me? And so that's kind of what I've had to do is go through that process and go, oh, is that what that was? And then I can recognize it a little bit quicker next time that I'm internalizing because I'm like, no, they did this to me and they're winding me up. And no, they're not. They're 12. They're driving. They're doing their best. They're whatever it is.
Amazing.
So it's, understanding that self-regulating piece. And I put some tools in the course and stuff of how to think about emotions, how to think about the brain. And oftentimes it comes too late and you go, oh, and then you have to go back and go, sorry, I flipped my lid on that one, or I missed that one. And there's a lot of apologising.
That's what life is though, isn't it? So can we talk about so what you're doing with empathy first? Because I feel like we've everyone who is listening to this point has a very good idea that you're an expert in the field, right? So let's talk to what you've been doing to apply this knowledge and help people upskill. So can you give us a bit of a run through of, I guess, what empathy first is?
Yeah.
What you're doing, who you're working with, and just a little bit about that. That's okay.
Yeah, so everything that we do at Empathy First is really the goal, the mission is to create a world where everybody feels heard, valued, visible, and safe. The way that we do that is in-person courses. So everything that we do is about teaching people, and we've created this WISER framework, which is what is empathy? So like I said, if you're going to have a discussion about empathy in leadership, empathy in design, customer service, team cohesion, sales, writing, you need to know what we're talking about first. So we do what is empathy? We do introspection, which is why does this thing matter to me and my business and my people, and like how do I internalize that? Then we do self-empathy, which is what do I think about emotions and what are my boundaries and how do I think about how I feel about emotions? So self-empathy is a big piece because that's not self-care, which is like bubble baths and stuff. That's self-soothing. So pulling apart some of that sort of stuff. Using your ears, so learning to listen. And then the final thing we do is learning to talk, which is responding. So whether we apply that in-person workshops at workplaces, I've done work with the police, the Department of Veterans Affairs, with museums, with Domino's, all sorts of different companies. And each one has a different reason. Each one has a different why. Each one has a different context. So it's always bespoke to that organisation. We do online courses. So I've got how to practice empathy without burning out. I've got the emotional literacy boot camp, and then a little freebie called how to write empathetic emails. There's quizzes. So you can get involved in how empathetic am I or how empathetic is my team. So a couple of quizzes there. The podcast. So all of these different ways where we're trying to just lift the veil on it. So the Professional Empathy podcast looks at the value of empathy in a bunch of different professions and experiences. So this morning I recorded empathy as a drag. I talked to a drag queen. We've got empathy and professional sports people, tradies, police, a male sex worker, all these different experiences, parents of kids with autism, just trying to lift the veil and go, what is the value of empathy from that person and what is the value of empathy for that person? So we're always just kind of pulling it apart. And then most recently I've got the shop, the empathy shop or the empathy store. And it sells cards and stationery. For those moments when you don't know what to say, these cards are so beautiful and they're so funny. It's none of this, I'm sorry for your loss kind of stuff. It's feel what you need to feel. Or my absolute favourite says, please let me be the first to punch the next person who says all things happen for a reason. So they're some of them just say you're absolutely bloody brilliant. They're ways of creating connection, ways of making somebody feel heard, valued, and visible without having to come up with the perfect words. So, and there's a service where if you tell me which card, you tell me who it's going to, and you tell me what you want to say, I'll post it out for you. So it's a way of building connection on an even greater level. So there's lots of things that we do, but ultimately it comes back to what is it, why does it matter, and how do you do it?
Epic. As you know, the podcast is Chasing Good.
Mm-hmm.
What you've just described with what you're doing, there's some serious layers because about to what good is, right? You've got deep levels of context by your actions, your knowledge, and what you've worked through and what you're working on. Talking before, do good, do well, be good, be well, right? Some of the pieces you were talking to with the courses you teach as well. A couple of questions. Firstly, what is good to you?
Acknowledging that everybody messes up, acknowledging that people are generally doing the best they can with the resources they have available at the time, and that's going to change from day to day. But that assumption that, to me, that's good.
So it's the acknowledgement piece. So it's just so good is actively understanding that everyone is running their own race.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, we could talk about this for hours, but to me, it's everybody's doing the best they can with what they've got at the time. As a general rule, you don't want that to harm other people. But there are some times, if we look at it from an empathetic lens, there are people who the resources they've got at the time and the stuff they're dealing with and the life that they live, sometimes the best they can do actually does harm other people because they don't have the resources, they don't have the support. And so what we can't do is we can't judge other people. So I'm really lucky because I can do good because I have this privilege. And I can't judge other people who aren't. I can ask questions. I can go, wow, okay, what's driving them and what's going on and what are they afraid of and insecure about? But to me, if you're looking at somebody who's living with honor and self-reflection and embracing their fuck-ups and they're embracing their story and they're looking for growth and lessons and they're living into their values, absolutely that's good. Absolutely that's good. So they might not be changing the world, but they might be a janitor, like in Good Will Hunting. They're doing their job with honor and they're doing the best they can with what they've got at the time. Amazing. To me, that is amazing. And when I talk to people whose eyes light up and they're like, yeah, this is what I care about and this is what I'm doing. Amazing. To me, that's good. Do you know what I mean? So it's looking at, and today, if I don't do anything, I'm not productive, but I'm practicing self-empathy and I'm practicing it in a healthy way. That's good. If I'm being kind to myself and kind to other people, that's good. So I feel like in the social enterprise space especially, there is such a huge focus on founders and the people who have the big ideas and the people who are changing the world. And there's almost a sense of superiority that we're giving to them because that's what all the accelerators and stuff are for. I feel like we need to really lift the people in that ecosystem, people who are genuinely doing their best in the tiny little bubble that they are in. And if it is helping people in social enterprise or working in social enterprise or learning about it or learning about what are their values and how do they live into their values greater, like that's a thing that I'm really passionate about, then that's good. And so it's like one of your other guests said, it's not what is good, it's what's good enough. And that's going to change from person to person, from experience to experience, from day to day. And are you genuinely growing? Do you have a growth mindset? Are you genuinely interested in, I don't know, self-improvement if that's where you're at? And some days I'm not. Some days I'm on the couch with chocolate and and then I curse the Leanne that signed me up for all the courses and events. But yeah, self-care is cancelling as well. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, to me, good is fluid. Good is fluid based on what you have available at the time.
And you've mentioned living into the feeling, because there's a transition from feeling or perception to action, I guess, because there's the action orientated behind that. And so you've mentioned good is having that feeling or that intention. Would you say that it is better to have the follow through with action, or are you more so saying the good enough piece? So it's like it's good enough to do both, and whatever.
It's got to be good enough to do both, because if we lean into good as being finite or being the ultimate definition, then that suggests that there's a bad. And we don't want people to feel bad for doing as much as they can. Like it might not be. And so getting rid of this comparison mindset. So to me, like my values are bravery, impact, learning, and empathy. If I know that I've made a decision with those at its core, then I'm okay with that. And being brave means I'm going to make mistakes. Like I've done things that, like I ran a project once when we were doing the virtual reality. Good is not guaranteed. So when I was doing the virtual reality, usually we did virtual reality and we put this workshop with it. And we wanted to see whether just doing the virtual reality in and of itself was enough. So we didn't do the workshop and we did some before and afters, and it actually made stigma worse. And we went, doesn't mean that I am bad. It doesn't mean I had negative intention. We went back, we talked to the people because there weren't that many people, because we kind of kept that test quite small. But the intention was there, the understanding was there, but you can't assume that just because you want to do good, it has positive consequences. Like that's why in social enterprise, theory of change, impact measurement, growth mindset, human-centered design are all so important, because we know how might we, not how do we, how might we. We've got to understand what's going on, what the research is, and how to make mistakes and come back from mistakes, because you're not always going to get it right. Not everybody's going to love you. That's the other thing. Like I go out there and talk about empathy and run my workshops, and some people hate me. Did I do good? Maybe not for that person. But it's like a bell curve. Some people love you. Some people are like, that was a big waste of time. And I'm like, okay, cool. And in exactly the same workshop. Some people will love what I did. Some people are just like, nah, that's not my bag. Cool. So you can't assume or have that pressure on yourself that just because you want to do good, just because your heart's in the right place, it's going to land every time for every single person. Like even pink has haters. So taking that pressure off, you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to mess up. You're allowed to own it, learn from it. Who are you trying to impact? What are you learning from this? How do you use this as growth?
It's funny because at its very core, one of what, reading between the lines here, what you're saying is one of the first steps to being good is to having empathy to self.
100%.
Because if you can't, then...
Well, otherwise, what are you doing? You're just waving a flag and telling other people what they need to do. Mm. You know what I mean? You're in the ivory tower going, this is what the people need, without actually going, oh. Because I'm one of the activators for Future Anything. And these young kids, grade 9, we did it 2 days ago. They come and pitch me ideas. Ideas. And I go, would you do this? Would you buy this? Is this something that you need? And they go, no. And I go, what makes you think other people need it? Why do you care? And they go, oh. So I go, no, you have to look at what you care about first. What would work for you? What do you know about the people you're trying to help? What do you know about yourself? Right, now you can connect. Otherwise, you're just sitting back telling other people what to do. Mm. And everybody loves being told what to do. So sometimes good can come from a good place, but if you haven't done the work, if you haven't done the research, if you haven't looked internally first and been vulnerable enough for somebody to go, that won't work. Because a lot of times what people do is they get so hung up on the answer that they came up with, and it's not a good one, that they don't shift from it. And then there are unintended consequences.
I often talk to, a common thing with the podcast has been, what is good, right? Because you've got big picture good, you've got little picture good, which can be defined by, what's the impact for me personally, what's the impact for the wider community and the wider world. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And understanding the positives, but the net positive is kind of draw that line in the sand. What's going to happen at the end of it?
Yeah.
And finding that balance is such a complex piece that really requires you to remove your ego.
Oh.
And your own self perceptions.
Yes.
And whatever you think is necessary.
Yes.
And this is why things like the sustainable development goals are really important for there's a wider picture that everyone can work towards.
Yeah.
A global mission per se. It's a balance anyway. I slightly digress. I two questions left. Sorry to
go for it.
First question. 3 actions that someone can take to become more empathetic if they feel like it's something they'd like to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 1, listen to my TED Talk. No. Number 1 is get curious.
Yeah.
And I know Ted Lasso says get curious, not judgmental. Genuinely get curious about this.
Show.
Oh, I love Ted Lasso.
If you haven't watched, it's my favourite TV show of all time, actually.
I love it so much.
Good.
Season 1, season 2.
Yeah.
Get curious. Let go of, like you just said, that ego. Be curious into other people. Be curious about yourself. Be curious about why you react the way you do, or what you think, or what you think about empathy. Then once you're curious, then you start reading and you go, okay, what is empathy? Why does it matter? And what is my role in that? How have I been affected by it? How do I feel when I genuinely feel seen? What is the impact of that? How does that affect my relationships? So asking those really interesting, uncomfortable questions first is, do I love giving advice to people? And so the quiz asks some of those little jabby questions. And then looking at, what are your values? Do you live into your values? Do you assume things about other people and project onto them? Or do you go, no, my values are, and the decisions that I make lean into that. And as a general rule, human connection will come from that. So when we understand that we are not as judged as we think we are, that we can make mistakes, that we can get this wrong, that we are human, we are fallible, nobody's expecting you to be perfect, then you can lean into it and you can let somebody just be without taking it on and feeling that pressure to be right or perfect or give the right advice. So it's letting go of a lot of that stuff. Makes us more empathetic, because then I can just listen to you and go, that's cool. I didn't know that. Thank you for telling me that. I feel grateful that you shared that with me. So that curiosity about who you are and what makes you tick, and that's what builds empathy. So looking at how you define who you are. So there are questions that you can ask the whole way along. Things like, for me personally, is money the tool or the goal? If money's the goal, you'll make different decisions. If money's the tool to create good, you'll make different decisions. You look at good, you say, what's more important, doing good or being good? And you can play in that space, because the more we define ourselves as something, the less open we are then to being wrong or somebody else being that thing as well. You know what I mean? Because we hold on so much to I am the good guy, which means you have to be the bad guy. And I'm going to look for ways that you are the bad guy. You are different. As opposed to I'm the good guy, you're the good guy. There is no bad guy. You act how you act. I act how I act. It's all completely valid, because none of us has any idea what we're doing. Like, fundamentally, nobody has a clue.
Everyone's just winging it.
We are all winging it. We are all the ducks below the surface. We are all the iceberg. None of us have a clue what we're doing. And the thought that you are supposed to, I should feel like this, and I should do this, and I should look like this, and I should have achieved this. Nah. Let that crap go. Let that self-judgment go, which means then you're more likely or less likely to judge other people. Because it's not a competition. We are all in this storm together. None of us has a clue. So, yeah, unlearning unconscious bias, unlearning judgment, unlearning stigma, learning about what empathy is, learning about your values and your usefulness, and then you put it all back together and go, that's pretty cool.
Curiosity. I love the fact that you've taken it to curiosity to self.
Oh, absolutely.
As just as much as curiosity. Like, because you think empathy and you think I need to be curious about other people, but you're saying, no, to truly be empathetic, you need to be curious about yourself, to know your drivers, so you can actually truly find meaning in what other people are saying.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Empathy is not give.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you burn out. And, I mean, you look at people in social enterprise who go, I want to help the people, where they're working with folks who've experienced DV or like refugees, whoever. If you want to keep doing that thing, you want to keep creating that impact, you cannot burn out. And like one of the analogies that I use, so one of the podcast episodes I did was with Tammy Bullard, who's a paramedic. And like I had a paramedic next to me for part of it, when I was having my first child. I don't want them crying next to me. I don't want them taking on my stuff. I don't want them bringing the last person's stuff to me. And I don't want them taking my stuff to the next person. I want them to be there with me 100% in that moment. I know that I have their full attention. And then they practice self-empathy. They understand their boundaries. They let it go and they take their full self to the next person. And that's sustainable. Granted, there's a whole system there that they work within that needs help. But that's what we want of our friends. That's what we want of our relationships. If I tell you something, I don't want it to wear you down. I want you to be there and support me and value me. And then don't let it weigh on you. Let it go. Practice good self-care. Practice self-empathy and take your full self to the next person. That's what I want of the people around me.
Which leads into my next question.
Go for it.
What do you want for the wider world then?
To be less afraid.
Okay.
To be less afraid. So I think fear drives a lot of what we do. Like we're afraid of, one of the questions I often ask is, what might the person be afraid of or insecure about? Or what void are they trying to fill? But people are driven so much by fear. I'm afraid of looking like an idiot. I'm afraid of losing relevance. I'm afraid of losing money. I'm afraid of losing status. I'm afraid of not knowing what to say. I'm afraid of the conversation. I'm afraid of big emotions. I'm afraid. And so we don't reach out to people. I'm afraid of curiosity. Yeah. I'm afraid of being vulnerable. And so because of that, we push away. Yeah. I don't know what empathy is. Ugh, yeah, gross. Push it away. I don't understand it, so I'm afraid of it. Yeah. Same as what we were talking about with Carrie the One this morning with drag queens. I don't understand it. I'm afraid of it. I push it away. So fear is such a huge driver in humans. And I think if we even get curious about what we're afraid of, get vulnerable about what we're afraid of and what might happen. What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? You do that with kids where they're nervous about something. You go, okay, cool. What's the absolute worst case scenario? And they go, oh, this might happen. Okay. What's the absolute best case scenario? Oh, this could happen. Let's just aim for somewhere in the middle. But that takes courage in order to ask those questions. So that's my wish, is be less afraid of each other. Be less afraid of stuff and genuinely lean into curiosity and action and standing up and learning about your values and learning about other people. Because fear is the thing that holds us back and disconnects us. That's my big pie in the sky.
That is awesome. That is just fantastic. Leanne, that's all we have time for today. Honestly, I have learnt so much, and I feel like we could dive into so many other areas that are just so fascinating. But thank you so much for everything that you do. What you're doing is so important and so valuable to the wider community, and it is so impactful, and it's so good. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with me and whoever listens.
Thousands of people.
Yeah. And thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to Chasing Good, a Circle Group podcast. Our mission is to shift the world closer to kindness, sustainability, awareness, and action. We hope you enjoyed. Until next time.